Hello and welcome to episode 33 of the Brad Davidson Show, soon to be your ultimate comeback.
I love it.
Yeah. Super excited. We have a guest here today, and I'm going to let Raquel introduce her.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Okay. We have Dr. Christine Sells, and she is not only a yoga student, but also a friend of mine. And I don't want to start crying. I might start crying because when I first met her, it was during COVID. And okay, maybe this is part of the therapy if I start crying. But so don't laugh.
I'm sorry,
you brat.
I know, I'm sorry. You just had this conversation. Oh, you're like my younger brother. This is what we do.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Okay, so during COVID, I had a very rough time, as did a lot of people, right? And I think we had just met, correct? You were taking classes,
yeah.
And we had to kind of configure an outdoor deck so that we could still continue to teach classes. And I remember you attending, and I knew her name was Christine Sells because I really like to learn people's names. And I thought, gosh, that's so cute. Do you sell homes? Because you should. It's a great name for someone that's in, that field. And she said, no. But one day I had taught my class and I had a really rough time that day. I think just because it's just not the same being outside on a deck. And it really hit me that, this shit is real. Sorry, Mom.
It was close to March 17th of 2020.
Was it?
Yeah.
No.
Wasn't it when Gavin Newsom was going to shut down everything?
No, we were already shut down. We were shut down because we could do it outside.
Okay.
Yeah, it had been past that. It was past mid-March. I can't tell you when it was because Bobby got together with his worker bees and put that deck together so quickly.
It was when we were only allowed to gather in pods of 6
or whatever
people together.
But we were outside.
Yeah.
And I taught, and at the end of my classes, a lot of people know I say a quote at the end of my classes, and the quote just really got me that day, as they do a lot. And she comes up to me and she goes, I think you need a hug. And I was like, So that's really how, I don't want to say how we met, but I kind of feel like that's how we really connected because I thought, this person is special. And come to find out, she's a therapist. And maybe she could just tell that I am ripe for therapy because I'm a huge advocate of it, as are you.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, it's over 30 years. And I mean, I just think it's so crucial and so important. So that is what she is. She is not my therapist, I will say. But we do share one in common, though, which is interesting.
That's true.
Yes. And but her specialty is EMDR, and I'll let her tell you guys about it. But she's just, and she dates my chiropractor. So that's cool.
Maybe a future guest on your show.
Yeah, fun fact. Fact.
I still need to go see him.
Yes, he's amazing.
I know. You and Quinn keep talking all about him.
He's
Rick Bobinski.
Yes.
Okay.
Body Dog.
Yes. Oh, she
Body
put in a
doc.
plug. I love that.
it.
I love it. So, anyway, I want you to tell us all about it.
Yeah,
Tell us all about it.
before you I'm super excited for this because I was
Are you?
telling her before we started that I have experienced EMDR.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was. We'll talk about it later, but I don't know what the hell happened to me, but it had a profound impact on me. So I've always kind of want to know the ins and outs of what it really is, and like it was a wild, really good experience.
I just want to, before she starts, I want to say that the fact that you are so open to all the things, the therapy modalities, all of, working on yourself, huge, right? How many? There are a lot of men that won't do that.
Well, I
think that's huge.
I did not before I had kids.
Interesting.
I used to think that was, you're weak if you need that. And then I had kids and started seeing, realizing how much the father has an impact on kids and their futures. And that was the game changer for me.
Right.
Realizing I had all these things that I was just kind of ignoring or hiding from or not looking at.
Yep.
Pretending like they weren't there. And I was like, oh my gosh. And somebody told me, I heard this. This was in a men's group. This statement changed my life. You either transform or you transmit. Either you figure out your shit and you deal with it, or you're just going to pass it on to your kids for them to deal with. And I was like, okay, I don't want that.
Nope.
And you keep your issues in your tissues.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to plug Lori Sorrell for that
Does
phrase.
she say that?
Yeah.
I
issues
love
in your
it. Go,
tissues.
Lori.
Yeah.
Does she say that in class?
No.
Oh, okay. That's excellent, though.
There's a whole book on that. Your body doesn't lie.
Yeah. All right. So bum, bum, bum.
Let's do this.
Yes. Tell us all about it, Christine. So what is EMDR is the first question, probably.
Well, first of all, I just want to say that I've been a licensed psychologist for almost 30 years now.
How could you? You're so young.
The big 6-0.
I know, but she looks fantastic.
Yes.
Anyway, so the EMDR Center of Southern California, I'm the founder and director of training there.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So I help other mental health professionals who are either pre-licensed or independently licensed learn how to become EMDR trained therapists. Mm-hmm. And we're in an EMDRIA approved program, which is the EMDR International Association that governs the United States and Canada as well. And we're American Psychological Association approved sponsor for continuing education credit. So just wanted to get the bona fide,
So that you're not just someone we found on the street.
Right.
Not someone that gave me a hug and I thought we should have her on the show.
Anyway, EMDR is an amazing memory reconsolidation therapy. Mm-hmm. EMDR is not the only memory reconsolidation therapy.
Oh, is that right?
There are about 14 now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, neuro-linguistic programming, emotion-focused therapy, and EMDR, just to name a few. EMDR is a relatively new therapy modality. In 1989, the first journal article was published by Francine Shapiro, the founder of EMDR.
Okay.
She discovered this. And that was in the Journal of Traumatic Stress. And she had validated EMDR's effectiveness with who had PTSD, volunteers who did the therapy with her, vets. Mm-hmm. So from 1989 until now, there's been a plethora of research supporting its effectiveness for remediating all kinds of symptoms, not just the diagnosis of PTSD, but depression, other anxiety disorders, claustrophobia, specific phobia of needle phobia.
Oh, okay.
People who are going through fertility treatments often will have an aversion toward giving themselves the shots. And so they may want to come to EMDR therapy to, get rid of that symptom. There's a great application with it now. Personality disorders, substance abuse.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, wow.
But the standard protocol, which Francine Shapiro started with, is not the only EMDR protocol. And so I don't want to lead people to believe that there's just one kind of EMDR protocol, the standard EMDR protocol, which is applicable to everything and anybody. That is actually inaccurate. So in EMDR therapy, we really focus in on the first of the 8 phases to look at what is the history of this person's life like, what is the history of their symptom like, how did it start and how did it develop over time and how is it maintained dysfunctionally. And then we also do paper pencil assessment of a person's dissociation coping, whether or not they have that. Because if they do, and that's part of the symptom picture, then we need to remediate that as well, because that blocks effective EMDR reprocessing. So in my opinion, the most important phase of the 8 phases of EMDR is the history taking and the assessment of the person. Mm-hmm. And then you have your other phases. But I want to get Brad into this and ask him some questions because I could go and go and go.
Yeah.
Well, it was interesting when so I was sharing with her earlier. I was introduced to it actually by an NFL player. Mm-hmm. He had retired from the sport, and the way he was kind of ousted from the NFL was really traumatic for him.
Yeah.
And so I had an experience that was pretty traumatic, and I saw this gentleman. He's like, "You have PTSD?" I'm like, "No, I don't have PTSD. Like, you got to go be a warrior in war and see horrific things, or first respond. Like, this didn't cause PTSD." And he's like, "No, it did."
Yeah.
Because what was happening to me, I was having a physical response to a certain situation where, like, literally, I would start to tremble and I couldn't stop, and I go into panic mode. And it happened with my daughter. It happened. She did something, not even meaning to, but it triggered me. And by the time I caught up to her, I just lost it.
Yeah.
because I was in such a panic. And so I reached out to my buddy. I'm like, man, like, this is what's going on. He's like, this guy, he's one of my best friends. He's done so much for me, and especially in this realm, and he's been so supportive with it. He's like, you need to go do EMDR. Like he was having physical responses with things that were happening to him from the trauma he'd been through football. So I started going to this gentleman that was doing it, and it was phenomenal. I think, like I said, told you, like 5 sessions, and it cleared pretty quickly. And it's funny. It's so funny we had this conversation because just last night something happened that would have triggered me that same way before I'd done EMDR, and it didn't trigger me. So I'm like, oh, it's so cool that we're having this conversation today.
Yeah.
This was the modality that really helped me in the situation. And it's happening to me the night before.
Isn't that amazing how these things happen?
I slept great last night. Like, you know, it's like, it just didn't get me.
Good.
So I want to, like, can you, I don't even know how to explain to people what it is. Like, what happened to me? It was like the stuff, like they were doing stuff with my eyes and things like that. And it was such a different experience than a typical therapy session I've ever been through. What exactly is going on as they're going through because I remember we went back to the moment, and then we kept replaying the moment, and we were doing something with my eyes. It was a while. I don't even know if I'm explaining it right, but that was my memory. It was a while. It was years ago, but it was an interesting experience.
Yeah, well, first of all, the acronym EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Okay. So whatever happens in EMDR is right there in the acronym. Actually, there are hypotheses as to why EMDR is effective. What's the mechanism of action? And we have about 6 hypotheses we work off of. The one that I like to explain to people learning as therapists, that they will explain to their clients, or when I explain to my clients, is called the REM sleep hypothesis. So all mammals dream when they sleep, and that's rapid eye movement. And you'll see the saccadic eye movements under the eyelids of animals.
We see the dogs do it. We see our dogs do it.
Absolutely. Humans do it. You know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that is a time during sleep when the body's doing a lot of different things. There's, protein synthesis, the body heals itself, we, process the remains of the day. And that's actually the eyes searching, the brain is searching itself. So in EMDR, we don't have saccadic eye movements. We have smooth, forced eye movements that encompass 70% of the field of vision. And this kicks the brain into an investigative mode.
Wow.
Right? And so this is where I'm going to bring in what Francine Shapiro talked about and formulated in 1991 after she had initially brought in eye movement desensitization. So the reprocessing part of it, in 1991, she came up with the adaptive information processing hypothesis. So intrinsic to the human condition, when we have an experience that is challenging, or even on a physical level, our body gets to work right away trying to heal. And when we take this into the mental realm, when a person has a stressful event, their mind is set up to be able to reflect on this experience and come to an adaptive resolution and a state of emotional equilibrium. This is when we have non-traumatic events during the day. Maybe something that's slightly annoying or some problem we're working through.
Right.
So, and then those memories go from short-term storage and we move through the hippocampus and we contextualize the beginning, the middle, the end, and from there the brain, makes all of these neuronal connections and associations to other parts of the brain so that we can place what happens to us in an appropriate context. When somebody has either an overwhelming traumatic experience as an adult, similar to what you're talking about, Brad, or when the brain is developing itself in, childhood, and there are ongoing relational stressors, neglect, traumatic experiences from which the child cannot escape, the brain itself develops differently in a neurophysiological, parlance. But when you have that kind of developmental trauma or an adult onset trauma that's just too much for the person to process through the remains of the day in REM sleep, the brain stores that experience in a different part of the brain, and it's stored in mainly like sensory fragments. It's a fragmented way that a person can remember this. And after that traumatic experience, if the brain detects through the amygdala, the threat cue part of the brain, detects that it could be similar to that first traumatic experience, the person will get triggered. Mm-hmm. And they might have sensory fragments of this traumatic memory come in to remind them, get away from that stimulus as a way to survive and adapt. And so with EMDR therapy, with the forced eye movements, back and forth, the person is told to bring up, we work memory by memory to develop an adaptive resolution and equilibrium. We light up that memory network, which is composed of different elements, the image or the sensory component, the positive way that you would want to think, you develop the negative cognition you have about yourself related to that memory. And then you have what you would prefer to believe about yourself. Mm. So there are thoughts that are part of the memory network. There are sensations that are part of the memory network. There is an overall subjective sense of disturbance. And when the therapist lights up the maladaptive, we call it the maladaptive memory network, that gets lit up, then the eye movements begin. And the brain goes through its own information processing sequence during the eye movements. And it's on a conscious as well as a subconscious level that all of this is happening. And in the very beginning of going through the problematic memory with the EMDR therapy, we go through usually what is called the emotional information processing. So the toxic elements that are associated, the emotionally toxic elements that are associated with this memory come to the fore. And it can be quite intense.
I'm sure.
It peaks at about 10, maybe 15 minutes, and then it drops off. Mm-hmm. And then that's drained away as the brain begins to investigate itself. From time to time, the therapist will stop the eye movements. You remember this part, Brad?
Oh, yeah.
Stop the
I
eye
remember
movements.
It being a very uncomfortable
We'll
experience.
say rest, take a deeper breath.
Yeah.
Let it go. Mm-hmm. What do you notice now? And then the client will say the last thing that they landed on. And that's an indicator to the therapist that they're on track with what they're working on.
Right.
Or the therapist has to do an intervention to bring the person back on track. In EMDR therapy, the therapist is meant to stay out of the way and to let the person's intrinsic adaptive information processing system do the work.
Wow.
And so then it's after a series of sets of these eye movements, there'll be ratings that are taken. When you return your attention to the original memory, what do you notice now? Then the person will say what they notice. If it's neutral or even maybe a positive association to it, the therapist will, of course, take a measurement of what we call subjective units of disturbance, and they'll rate it from 0 up to a 10.
I remember that.
You remember that,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. It came up a lot.
That came up a lot.
Yeah.
Your therapist was giving fidelity to the model. That's really good. And so when you get 2 report backs of a 0 in a row, then you move on to the next phase, which is called the installation phase after the desensitization phase. And then we're stamping in positive or more positively adaptive information processing to the original problematic memory, so that when ultimately the memory is finished with reprocessing during the session or in the next session if it's incomplete, the person can recall the originally disturbing memory and it will have no heat on it, so to speak.
Nice.
Yeah, I can vouch for that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can even remember the triggering event now and it has no impact on me.
Really?
I can now talk about it. Like I used to not even be able to talk about it without freaking out. I can talk about it. I can relive it. I can think about it, and it has zero impact on me anymore.
So is that the goal, Christine?
The goal is memory reconsolidation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But when prior to having the experience, I was going through a lot of therapy on it, like talk therapy, like different styles of therapy, and just nothing would. As soon as I was triggered, it was done.
Right.
As soon as I was triggered, my body took over, and the panic kicked in, and we're talking like physically trembling and shaking. I couldn't sit down, and it would just last and I just build up in my head, like build, and then I finally just collapse and fall asleep.
Would it happen at the same time? Or would there be an event that would...
There would be an event, a similar event that would trigger.
A triggering event.
Yeah.
Something similar.
It would make me feel like it was a no shit, like a panic moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does it feel like a panic attack?
Oh, hell, no, because I've had a panic attack. It was a very different feel.
Okay.
It was, I don't know how to explain it. It was a feeling I'd never had before in my life. And I haven't, it's been years since it's probably been maybe year and a half since I've had it.
Okay.
The last time I felt it. But yeah, it was just a complete just chaos in my head. You could not calm me down.
Right.
I remember I had a couple of them in front of my kids. And I'm like,
boy.
What the hell are you doing? Like, just I couldn't.
Yeah.
I could not shut it off until it worked its course and then put me down.
Right. In EMDR therapy, what likely happened in your case, and if it went as it should, I'm sure it did.
Yeah.
So your therapist lit up the maladaptive memory network, got you all situated so that you're remembering what happened and you're having many of the thoughts and the feelings.
He got me to relive it.
Yes.
He triggered it. He got it to trigger.
Exactly.
By getting into so much detail about the event when it happened.
Yeah.
And just making me go over it. Yeah, 100% he did.
Right. And so when the I've movements started, that began your brain investigating itself to say, wait a minute, is this happening now? Or is this a memory?
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And so the eye movements themselves have what we call an habituation effect, so that part of your brain is recognizing, I'm watching these stupid lights go back and forth. This is kind of boring. And another part of the brain is chewing, so to speak, on the experience.
Yeah.
And then the brain recalibrates itself like, wait a minute, I'm remembering this. This isn't actually happening. And then that's when the brain is ripe to allow new neuronal connections to come in and make sense, a different sense of what happened. And likely at that point, a lot of the emotional toxicity and the disturbing sensations were draining away so that, so to speak, there was room for a new understanding and a reconsolidation of the memory. It's a mismatch experience, which is common to all memory reconsolidation therapies.
Yeah. Well, because I remember the memory that I put to the event was, it was a life-changing event. Like, in that moment, my life drastically changed in a way I didn't want it to. So anytime someone would trigger that, I'm like, oh, shit, what's going to happen to my life? Like, so it was weird. Like, I shared with my triggering event was, if you're communicating with me and then you disappear and you stop responding to me for hours and hours and hours, that's my triggering event. So like my daughter was at, she was at one of the theme parks. I can't remember the name. Knott's Berry Farm.
Okay.
With her friends. And I'm there. I have my son and she's with her friends and I let them go off and be on their own. This was a few years ago.
Okay.
Said, okay, we're going to meet here at this time. And that time comes and I get there and she's not there. And I am texting her, no response. Her phone's dead.
Oh, God.
She's not showing up.
The phone's dead is the worst.
And by the time I finally find her, I'm freaking out. I'm thinking,
sure, of
someone
course,
kidnapped her. Like,
right.
I'm thinking it's the worst.
Yes.
Like at that, I build up to like the worst possible scenario. Like my life is going to be completely ruined, like different. By the time she gets to me, I explode, and she's like, "Dad, I've been calling you from my friend's phone. You wouldn't answer. It was some number that I didn't recognize because my phone had died. I was calling you and calling you and calling you, and you wouldn't answer. Oh my God. That's when I was like, I have to do something about this.
But here's the interesting part. For the fact that your daughter had given you the common sense explanation, your internal system had already locked and loaded and reorganized.
Yeah.
So what she said didn't make a damn bit of difference to remediate it.
Because I had the worst. Right. Like, I mean, it was where my brain used to go in those situations was horrific. And so so when she came, I'm like, I didn't even. I'll be honest. It was later that night when I was like, oh, I'm the moron here. Like, she was calling me, and I saw the number. I have no idea who this is. Stop calling me. I need to find my daughter. Like, stop calling. I need to find my daughter. Like, I gotta find my daughter. Like, stop. And it was her.
Oh my God.
So that experience was put into a certain file cabinet, so to speak, in your brain, and likely there was an antecedent prior experience that opened up a file cabinet for new stuff that's similar to be put in.
That wasn't the event that triggered me. It was it was prior to that. So last night was funny. So she's out with her boyfriend. I let them, they're out hanging out.
Did you just say boyfriend?
I know. I'm so weird to still say.
You might need to be in therapy for that.
Yeah. But she's like, okay, I'll be home by 6:30 because she had volleyball like later at 8:00 that night, and 6:30 rolls around. She's not home. She's not texting me. The old me would be like, where the fuck are you?
Right.
I was able to let it go, and like she showed up like 30 minutes late. And it was not a big deal. They were just out having ice cream, hanging out. And I was like, God, I'm so freaking proud of myself. Like, I would have been a train wreck. Like, where's my daughter? What have you done with her? Did she guys get in a car accident? Thinking the worst.
You're going to the movie Taken, aren't you?
That movie, exactly. Like, but like, so it sounds super silly.
No, I don't.
Prior to my EMDR experience and dealing with it, like my relationship with my daughter would be massively strained by now because of situations like that. Like she knows that I trust her, and she's very open and honest about everything.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, I love it. Like shares everything with me and her mom. Like she doesn't hold anything back.
That's the best.
It's
the best.
But had I not dealt with that, it would have been experience after experience. She would just be like, "Dude, here I'm out.
Yeah,
like, what's
for
wrong
sure.
with you?" Yeah, so. So to have that last night before we're talking about them, like, okay, that's
perfect.
Awesome.
Perfect timing. Isn't that wild how these things happen? So I have a question I think most people would think, they think trauma and they think, oh my gosh, it's been something really horrific. It's been something like, it doesn't have to be, correct?
No, it does not.
No. So define, or give us some examples of traumas that you've worked with and helped people, just so we get kind of a picture of what types of things one could come see you for or whomever.
Well, in the training realm, the way I explain it to therapists who are learning about EMDR is that there are big T traumas and little T traumas.
Right.
Not distinguishable by objective criteria per se.
Right.
But most importantly, it is the subjective experience of what's happened that matters.
And I'm sure when as well. Right? Plays a big role in that.
When, particularly in childhood, when traumas happen, they pack a bigger punch.
That's what
so to speak. Because the brain is developing. So examples of big T traumas, obvious natural disasters, catastrophic earthquake.
Oh, okay.
Floods, like you had mentioned, a sexual assault.
Right.
Person crimes of any kind.
Maybe surviving an event and someone else did not.
True. Yes. Our veterans can attest to that. And then little T traumas can be anything from being chipped away at with jokes at our expense. It could be being stonewalled by your spouse. It could be anything from repeated rejections in the dating world.
Okay.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Giving you a flavor
Yeah,
there?
definitely.
I want to say, mostly to guys, because the event that happened to me really wasn't, like in my mind, I'm like, it was so, like, it was so, it wasn't like that. Didn't feel like trauma. Like,
Well, that's because you're a guy and you were taught to rub some dirt on it and keep going.
well, and I work with, I work with
Studs.
like special forces,
Sure.
like, warriors, like,
Right.
And this little thing happening, like, that's not trauma.
Right.
And not only did I think it wasn't trauma, this guy was telling me, oh, you have PTSD. I'm like, there's no way in hell that little event is PTSD. And he's like, no, it is. And he had to spend some time explaining trauma and PTSD to me.
But what a gift.
Oh, it was a super gift. And I just want guys to know, like, trauma's trauma.
Right.
Like, you can't really control how your body responds to the event. So it's big or small. My event probably wouldn't have been traumatic to some people. Other people it would have been traumatic like it was to me. It was just how my body responded to the experience. It took it as a big T.
Yeah.
But as a guy, I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like, suck it up. Like, just move on. It's not that big of a deal. But to me, it was like mentally, emotionally, it was like this life-altering experience. And until I finally just succumbed, I'm like, okay, that to me, that was trauma. That was a big deal to my psychology.
Right.
And to succumb to it, it was huge for me because I fought it for a long time. The first session I had with the guy, I'm like, it's not trauma. He's like, no, not only
He's
is
like,
it
oh, great, we're going to be here for a while.
Yeah, he's like, no, he goes, not only is it trauma, it's PTSD for you. Like it's such big trauma to you. You're having PTSD from it. I'm like, there is no way that is this is PTSD. He's like, yes, it is.
So that didn't feel good for you at that point to have that
No, I
validated?
felt like a pansy.
Really?
I felt like, oh my God, like I'm working. These guys are over here dealing with horrific scenarios.
Right.
And I got this little thing. And now I'm like, they don't have PTSD, but I do. So it was hard for me.
You needed symptom reduction. You needed that to not be in your life because you had the sense.
Yes,
you've said that you didn't want your relationship with your daughter to suffer.
But like, I couldn't pinpoint it of. This is trauma. This is PTSD. This is what's causing that. Like I didn't want to buy off on that little event. Threw my whole world upside down mentally and emotionally.
Right.
And when I finally succumbed to him, I said, okay, fine, that's what it is. And then after going through the whole experience, I'm like, oh my God, it was, and it is.
Yeah.
And I don't think people recognize that it doesn't take some horrific experience. It could be small experiences like those, like you're talking about, little T's. It was really wild to me that the perception I had around trauma and PTSD and like, I don't know, it was a hard thing. But so I just want guys like, trauma's trauma, and you can't control how your body responds to it. Is my feeling of it. To me, it was a life altering. Like my psychology took it as your life's over. Like everything changes, and it really wasn't that big of a deal. But how I played it out in my head was this massive thing. And I talked to a lot of guys like, oh yeah, I don't have trauma. I don't know. Oh God. I'm gonna guarantee you do. Like just because you say you don't, because it's pretty hard in this world to get through it without some trauma, right?
Well, absolutely. It doesn't mean that everybody must go to therapy.
Right.
However, people show up in therapy when they get uncomfortable enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And
same with the gym, right, Brad?
Oh yeah, 100%. No one wants to deal with it
until it's a problem.
Yeah, until they can't not deal with it.
Right.
Yeah.
But see, what's interesting is since we're rebranding the podcast and calling it Your Ultimate Comeback, so many of these things that we've discussed with Shelby, with Christine, with all these things, these are all things that make us better
100%.
as we move through life. And I've always thought that I'm fascinated that more people don't want that. I mean, I've been in therapy over 30 years with this guy, and he better not ever die or retire because it'll be problematic. But I honestly want to be better, and it's sad to me when people don't, or maybe don't know how to begin.
Yeah.
Does someone need to begin with something like what you do, or do they begin with a talk therapy and then they transition, or it's you do talk therapy as well, correct?
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So you may have someone that comes to you and says, I want to, everyone doesn't always say I need EMDR. Is that correct?
That's absolutely true. Yeah.
And you may suggest it.
Not everybody wants EMDR.
Okay.
EMDR is not branded as a talk therapy, although we talk. Right. It's mainly a private experience for the person when they're doing the sexy part of EMDR, which is the fingers going back and forth or the lights going back and forth rapidly. But the other phases of EMDR, particularly phase 1 in the history taking and preparing the person so that they can withstand the trauma confrontation, that's very much a collaborative back and forth talking through it. Yeah. You can, like I said, EMDR is not the only way.
Right.
But people prefer sometimes to talk it through.
Sure.
They want to wax philosophical. And then other people are thinking, hey, can I get this banged out in 12 sessions, please? Not every symptom, diagnosis, whatever, can be remediated in 12 sessions. So some people, everybody's appropriate for EMDR. Not everybody's appropriate for standard protocol EMDR starting in the second or third session.
Okay. So you may take more time to get there with certain people. Got it.
Depends on what a person's internal system is like.
And when I walked into the gentleman's office, I didn't realize the episode was. So it took a few sessions before he's like, here it is.
Oh.
I'm like,
was it different than what you thought it was?
I didn't know what it was.
Oh,
when I went in, I just know that I was having all these struggles. I was in a really, really dark place in my life.
Okay.
And so as we were walking through it, I talk confidently, and now that I know it, because he found it. He's like, okay, here's the thing we need to work on, and then we went into the EMDR around that thing. I didn't walk in and be like, oh, I need help right here with this thing. I'm like,
most people don't have that.
Yeah, I walked in. I'm like, I need
insight,
help. Like something's really wrong with me, and like I get these responses, and I couldn't even at that point didn't realize that this was a triggering event. I just knew my whole life had fallen apart, and I couldn't take it, and I was getting worse and worse and worse.
Right.
And like I was having these, I kept telling myself, I keep having these weird physical symptoms. I didn't even correlate that they were being triggered by this.
Wow.
It took some time with him, and then once he found, oh, this is what we need, we're going to work on this. And once we worked on that, and he took me through EMDR on that, that's when all the physical responses went away. I didn't even, I wasn't at that point in my life like correlating like, oh, when this happens, this happens. I'm like, I'm just super messed up. Like my life's falling apart. It's dark. Like I'm afraid now of how I'm acting. I can't handle anything. Like I'm like, I need something to help change the trajectory of my life falling apart. Because I was at that point, I was starting to drink more. I was like doing things to just like to numb everything. And that's where it was. I'm like, I can't do this. Like I can't keep going down this road of numb, hide, escape. All I knew was like I'm either escaping or I'm getting triggered. Like help.
And you wanted to find, that.
I just needed something to turn my trajectory because the escapism was getting worse and worse and worse. It was taking more and more scenarios to numb and to shut it off just so I could sleep at night and stuff like that. So we with the first few visits were a lot of talking, a lot of reliving things, and he was the one that was like, I want to start here in this moment right here.
And so phase 2, which is the preparation, oftentimes a person can get 50 to 80% reduction in their symptoms just by doing the preparation exercises.
Wow.
Interesting.
The self-control procedures, the emotional stabilization stuff. And then, you go into the desensitization portion of it, and you can move through pretty quickly and easily.
Yeah, there was a lot of time with this guy. I always talk about the EMDR section of it. I don't really remember a whole lot prior to that. As we're talking, like, memories are coming back. Like, oh, he was actually the one that found that. It wasn't me walking in. I make it sound like, I need help with this, help me with this, and we did EMDR, and then bang, I'm done. Yeah. It was that. I think there was some of that stuff, because he gave me...
calm place, safe place,
tools
exercise?
To use when I was starting to feel the symptoms before we did EMDR.
He did the preparation exercise.
Yeah, now they were talking like, oh yeah, we did that too. I don't remember what those were, but I remember...
Container exercise.
I don't even remember. But I remember like getting triggered. I could do things and it would calm me down more. I would still get the trigger response, but I could calm myself down at one point. So there was a lot that went in. So as I'm kind of like, oh yeah, here, fix this. And he did it in 5 sessions. Like, no, there was around, I think it felt like 5 sessions or so around like the EMDR experiences.
Right.
Where he was triggering me and then we're doing I was following his fingers. Yeah. And then as like all of a sudden one day it was like kind of all went away. The triggering, like the symptoms. Right. What I wanted to go on was the physical, like shaking and panic and freak out mode. I was like, you got to take that away because that's what I was numbing.
Right.
But so one day I'm like, oh, I didn't have a drink today, and I didn't have that response, and it's been a week. I haven't had a week. It was all of a sudden the numbing, I could stop numbing and I could deal with it. It was not short lived. It took a while, but I just remember the EMDR, like the finger moving, the eye movement stuff, and like feeling it go away throughout those, like the symptoms. He would trigger me, and this, like, I remember the first time he triggered me, I was freaking out.
I'm sure.
I'm like, okay, I don't like this.
Yes.
But the more we did it, like and I remember the 1 to 10 scale. I remember the scale dropping over time, and so one day I'm like, yeah, that didn't bother me. Like I'm a 0. And
nice.
Yeah, it was super. Like, so I just remember that being very very life changing experience for me. Like one of the things throughout therapy, I'm like, oh, I'm super happy that I had that.
No, this wasn't with your guy that you've had on the show.
No.
Okay,
this
someone
was a different one.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
So after I went through all that, the same gentleman that had me go to EMDR sent me out to the camp. Have you ever heard of On-Site?
I have not.
Oh, out in Nashville. It was like this week-long therapy camp for adults.
Is that the all men's group?
No. It was men, women,
okay.
everything.
Okay.
It was like 10 months of therapy in a week. It was super intense. You're out in this crazy awesome farm in Nashville, Tennessee. It was hard as hell, but it was wild. It's like I owe a lot to this guy who's like, he's the guy I can go to and just be like, dude, I am suffering. Like, and same thing, he'll come to me like, I am suffering. Like, we can have really good.
That's awesome.
And he's like this, looks like a freaking 6'5", 300 pound.
Oh, I know him,
like,
don't I?
You do, yeah.
Is he in
like
finance?
Beard.
Does he have blue eyes?
He has this Viking beard. Like,
if you know, you know.
He's awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been phenomenal.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Everyone should be blessed to have someone like that in their
100%.
life.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so incredible that you have that.
If you
really
saw him,
is.
you would look at him and be like, "Oh, there's no way that's the guy that you get stuck. There's no way that's the guy. Like, I think he's gonna kill me
with his bare hands."
Yeah, he's the biggest, nicest guy you've ever met. Who like allows me and pushes me and challenges me to deal with that stuff. It's beautiful. He's a
We
great
all
man.
need people like that.
Oh, 100%
right?
we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Well, tell people where they can find you if they are interested in sort of dabbling in this, discovering.
Absolutely. Well, people who are just, in the general public can Google EMDR Center of Southern California.
Okay.
And are all the consultants who work with the training program will pop up, and most of them are in California, but I have people in Utah. And
you've trained a lot of these people, correct?
Most everybody on my staff I've trained.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And you do those, is it quarterly? You do?
I do 2 trainings a year for
okay.
mental health professionals.
Okay,
right?
got it.
One in person at the Mental Health Collective over here in Newport Beach. They're kind enough to co-sponsor. And then I do a virtual one where people from all around the world can join in. Who are therapists.
Right,
People who are general public who want EMDR therapy can still Google EMDR Center of Southern California and find me and anybody from my staff who are approved consultants.
Okay. Well, to that point, I've heard there's some not so good ones, like anything, I'm sure. How does one vet that?
That's a really good question, Raquel. Somebody who is searchable through the EMDR International Association.
Okay.
So you would go to emdria.org.
Okay.
They have an icon on their landing page, find a therapist.
Okay.
You can punch in that person's name and their location and find out whether they're a member.
Okay.
And what level of expertise they have. So people can be EMDR trained coming out of a basic training, which is the one that I provide.
Right.
It's like your basic entry level. And then you can deliver EMDR therapy services to the general public.
Okay.
Of course, staying within your scope of practice, right? Then the second level is certified in EMDR therapy. And that will be indicated if you go to emdria.org, you put in the therapist's name and they come up and it shows, they're certified and they're approved consultant. Approved consultant is the highest level of advanced designation for a practitioner. And then beyond that, you're a trainer, which I am a trainer.
Okay. Yeah. So you're really high up there on the on the hierarchy. I love it. That's awesome.
I love this conversation.
Yeah.
And One thing that I want to just share with people that are listening is that to step into this world is probably the scariest thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I was scared to death. It's much easier to escape and numb than it is to deal with it.
Yep.
But from my experience with it, it was the best decision I've ever made in my life is to face this stuff. People that I'm close with, I see so many of them have hit that point where they have nothing else to do but deal with it.
Mm.
And every single time the conversation is, I don't want to do this. It's the scariest thing I've ever done.
Right.
And the outcome is always like, I'm so glad I faced that fear and did it.
Mm-hmm.
So I really encourage people, like if you're there, if you're struggling, if life's not going your way, if you've had some trauma, if you are escaping life, if you are numbing, don't judge yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like we all do it. Like it's the first step. In my opinion, it's the first step of dealing with things is to go down that numbing process. I almost feel like you have to go down that way to finally hit a point where you're ready to deal with it.
They call it rock bottom.
Yeah, it's just the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I encourage you, if you're there, take some action.
Yeah.
Face your fear, take a step forward.
Absolutely.
And you will never be disappointed in that journey you take. And they always say the best life is on the other side of fear. And I really believe that after my experiences in life and people I've worked with that have done it. You will never regret doing it, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
You'll never regret facing it.
Right.
And finding some ways to cope with it and deal with it.
Healthier.
And heal from it. And remember, like what I said in the beginning, transform or transmit. That was the thing that I needed to hear.
Mm.
Oh, now you're gonna make me cry.
Isn't it? Oh,
Like,
good. I'm gonna make you cry. Oh,
It's transform or transmit, and that was the thing I needed to hear. Like, oh shit, either I deal with this or I'm gonna just dump it on my kids, and I just did not want to do that. And that was the thing when I was the most scared that I needed to hear.
Right.
Because I didn't want them to suffer with it.
No.
And I'm super proud of their mother. She did the same thing.
Yeah.
She same thing. She finally faced it, and she went down that road, and she's dealt with it.
Yeah.
And our kids are benefiting so much from both of us.
That's so impressive.
Like facing the fear and dealing with it. Like I'm proud of her because she's not transmitting her stuff. I'm not transmitting my stuff.
Yeah.
And I can just see it in my children and how they're handling things in life.
Yeah.
Like geez. They have a super strong foundation to work off of.
Which
they, when they were born, they did not.
Yeah.
They did not.
Yeah.
And they've been through some rough shit with the stuff we've put them through. And because we you know what, we did it to them. Like they've been through some trauma. They've been through some shit.
But look how much better off they are.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I couldn't be happier for them and the life they get to live because of that.
Yeah.
So
That's beautiful.
It's I love that.
I feel like there may be some people out there listening who are saying to themselves, but I don't have that big T trauma thing going on, but I'm just like low grade depressed.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in just a low key funk. And I have to say my personal story of coming to EMDR before I was trained was a little T trauma. So I'm divorced, and I have 50. One of my kids is grown now, but 50% custody. And the nights in the early times, the nights when my kids weren't with me, and I would just be putting myself to bed all by my lonesome, and I'd have this like sour feeling in my gut, and my heart was just kind of gripping itself. But it wasn't super big. Like I wasn't tearing. It was just like this low-grade awful. And I just did not imagine myself getting out of it. Like, okay, I'm divorced now, and my kids I'm going to live with them half the time. This is awful. And I would have trouble falling asleep, to shake that like awful feeling in my gut and my heart. And so I had heard about EMDR, and I went to somebody local here in Newport who was trained by Francine Shapiro. And, within, 5 or 6 sessions, we were working on, my instant of trying to go to bed and having that awful thing in my stomach. And one session of reprocessing that particular memory, gone, never to reappear. I said, I am sold. I'm getting trained. I'm getting trained.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's I'm so glad we talked about it and
Yeah.
shared it with people, because I had kind of forgotten about it. I had forgotten about my experience with it.
How could you forget that?
I mean, it just you go through so much,
Yeah.
so many experiences.
Right.
But as soon as you brought it up, I'm like, oh my God, yes, we have to have her on.
I
because
know
that
you
was
didn't really even pause. You said
no,
yes.
'cause I'm like, oh, immediately like, oh, that was a big benefit to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
But it's been so long. I just kind of
Sure.
forgot that it was how much of an impact it had on me. So I'm super excited you came on. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Awesome.
Thank you for being
Really
sharing
here.
with
glad to be
us.
here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was great. So really appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thank you all for listening.
Yep.
That was a fun one. Got a couple
Emotional one. Emotion. We have to have Kleenex up here on set from now on, apparently.
Yeah, geez.
66% tears.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
All
thank
right.
you both for showing up today. And,
Thank
and
you.
thank you for sharing your message and
Very welcome.
just teaching us. Really appreciate you.
Awesome. If
Yeah.
it can help anybody out there, it will be worth it.
Yes,
100
absolutely.
And I believe it will. That's my favorite thing about this
Yep.
stuff. Sometimes people just need to know what's out there.
Right. Right.
And so awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.